last night.
You could have. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. They're easy. They're easy. I did post once. Okay. Go ahead. All right. Shh, everybody up. Rise like a biscuit. That means we're done having conversations completely and totally. We're listening carefully. Yes, we are going to stand up. That's what rise like a biscuit means. Okay, cool. All right. Have a seat. Now, listen to me carefully. What I've always done at this point in the year is shut it down, done a review week, and given my exam about a month before everybody else's exam. That's what I've done for years because in 7th grade, kids have to learn the start of BAME, how to play BAME. BAME is like Monopoly, lots of rules, takes a long time to figure the thing out, and then you can go ahead and play. But we're not sure where BAME lands this year. The plan right now is to hopefully move it into the third of the year. So like after spring break. So if we can possibly manage it, it's going to depend on how infectious the COVID stuff is. Is there a vaccine out? Is there a possibility? Because as it stands right now, just with the COVID protocols, Mr. Goddard, Mrs. Doble, Mrs. Sullivan, and myself, we just can't figure out how we could do it with the exchange of things that have to take place in BAM. So anyway, what I've always done at this time, hopefully we'll do it at the end of the year, but what I've always done is stop the history lessons right at this point, give the exam on the history lessons. Then I've taken the rest of the time till Christmas to teach 7th graders how to do BAME. But because we're not going to start right after Christmas break, we don't have to have an election yet, which usually happens in December. We don't have to have bankers set and have elected senators and representatives and a president. We don't have to have figured out all kinds of other lessons that are important to starting the game of BAME. So what I'm thinking of doing is doing some of those economics lessons, some of those ideas of BAME, only without getting the pesos out and all, but I haven't quite figured exactly how that would be. Again, I'm kind of winging it with how I'm grading this year, because BAME has always been 20% of the history grade in 7th and 8th for really more than 20 years when we invented it. So anyway, as it stands right now, that's the way I'm leaning, is just giving a few little independent lessons that would be important for BAME, but not doing them necessarily geared to this is about passing pesos back and forth, but just so you get the idea. And we're going to do this little bit about the Constitution, but I don't have enough time between now and when your exam is, because remember, everything backed up a week. You guys start your Christmas break, I think, on Friday the 11th. So it's almost no time when we get back from Thanksgiving. So I just have enough time after that to give you the review sheets, and then we'll do the exam. Incidentally, for the exam, for history, I give you everything I want you to know, because we do go then and do a couple of weeks, several weeks on the Constitution when we get back after Christmas, and then we get back into the regular history. And I thought it was kind of unreasonable for me to try to go over a long time, then give you the exam. It's also unreasonable for me to say, okay, remember all that stuff from first semester, even though we haven't talked about it during 3 weeks of Christmas, 1 or 2 weeks of economics lessons, and then 2 or 3 weeks of studying the Constitution. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the things I most want you to remember: terms, people, events. And we'll go through and we'll get the definitions for those, and then you're going to take your exam based on those. Listen carefully. I'm going to say this one time. You're going to ask me 7 times, aren't you? Okay, here it comes. Ready? This is it. This is the one time I will say this. After this, I will lie through my teeth and tell you the wrong thing. Okay, so are you focused? Okay. If it's not on the review sheets, it's not on the exam. If you walk up and say, do I have to know this too? I will say yes. I will say yes every time you ask me something, because I just told you it was on the review sheet and that you had to know. So we can all watch him melt down. Okay? Yeah. All right. It's just like a little candle. All right, here we go. So a little material. Great. Yes, sir. Can you have $1 million? You can have $1 million, provided you you work hard, come up with an idea that people want to buy from you, and follow through with it. Yes, you can have $1 million. All right. Now, Treaty of Paris, 1783. The Americans had been given their independence, freedom. The resolution for independence said that these colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states, 13 separate countries. So now they had to figure out, well, do we want to be 13 separate countries? The country of Maryland, the country of South Carolina, the country of Massachusetts? Or, we did pretty well in this war. Shall we stick with the idea of working together? And if we do work together, how much power do we want to give to a central government? Because there was this British government that we were just under, and it was really strong. And so we don't want to have that happen again. So we don't want to create a big, strong central government that perhaps one day we'll have to have a revolution to get rid of. So let's not give much power to it. Before we get to the Philadelphia Convention, where they wrote the Constitution of the United States, our current government, wow, there was something else. It was called the Articles of Confederation. Does anyone remember what the definition of confederation is? A loosely formed alliance. That's key. A loosely formed alliance. That's what the states originally agreed to. We 13 states will work loosely together. So we kind of have some shared interests and we'll go with that. But we in New Jersey are not giving up the rights, any of the rights. We're just a loosely formed alliance. We don't want New York being big bullies to us or Pennsylvania, whatever. So we're going to make sure that we have our rights. And every other state said the same thing. We want our powers. No power, almost no power in the central government. It was pathetically weak. Like right now, if there was an argument between New Jersey and Pennsylvania, anybody know where the court case would go? It would go directly to the Supreme Court. An argument between two states. There's a court set up that says, hey, if there's an argument between the states, the Supreme Court will take care of it. Back then, no Supreme Court in the Articles of Confederation, so there's no place to go. So when they had an argument, Pennsylvania and New Jersey were actually shooting at each other. Not really good for getting along as a country. There were cases where, big arguments. Also, imagine this. If the United States were attacked and the government had no ability to raise an army, they couldn't say, greetings from the President of the United States, Daniel, cha-cha, you are in the army because we're having a national emergency. We need soldiers. Instead, what they could do, they could go to Wisconsin and say, hey, please, Wisconsin, could we have 1,000 soldiers? We really need them. And Wisconsin could say, no, we'll give you 50. How do you fight a war like that? How do you defend your territory? Now, obviously, Wisconsin wasn't one of the original 13, but it was crazy. I mean, they couldn't even really defend the country. Also, when it came time to raise money to run the government, they couldn't tax people individually. The national government, the Articles of Confederation government, could not lay a tax on anybody. So what did they do? The same thing. Hey, South Carolina, could we have $500,000 we need to run the government? And South Carolina could say, no, we'll give you 100,000. We think that's enough. Well, how is this possible to run the government? It was so weak. It didn't work. It couldn't solve the nation's problems. It couldn't take care of the nation's security. It couldn't even barely fund itself. They couldn't go through the rest of time scrambling to raise dollars and cents everywhere, just like they had during the Revolution. So they said, all right, we need to improve the Articles of Confederation. Oh, I need to mention also, there was one law passed under the Articles of Confederation, which was a really good law. It was called the Northwest Ordinance. Okay. First of all, you have to know something about the Treaty of Paris, 1783. British were worried. They'd had this war against the United States. They'd been fighting the United States. The French had gone in on the side of the United States. The French were the first ally the United States ever had. They were very friendly. Before that war, the colonies had been Britain's biggest customer. We bought more British goods than anybody else in the world. We stopped when the war happened. Britain was afraid we still wouldn't do it, that we'd now buy all of our stuff from France because they had helped us. So Britain was incredibly generous, crazy generous. What the United States asked for here, I'll come over here so people at home there can see, what the United States had asked for was pretty much the size of their original colonies. They said, give us, up to here, we want this. Give us this as the United States. And Britain said, wow, we really want to win them over. Hey, United States, you can have all the way over to the Mississippi River. Remember, this is owned by Spain. Britain will still be up in Canada. They said, well, you can go all the way over here. That was just to win our favor back so we become customers again, and we would go ahead and buy British stuff. So we get all the way over here. Now, the United States ends here. All right, when we think of the Northwest, we have to take off our blinders because we would think of this. But that's not the United States. This is the Northwest Territory because that's where the country ends. This is as far north and west as it goes. Well, this law, the Northwest Ordinance, they said, wow, we have all this land and it's not part of one of the states. What do we do with it? One of the thoughts was, well, each of the states could have colonies. We could have a little Rhode Island colony here, a little Connecticut colony, and over here would be, Virginia colony. But they quickly decided we hated being colonists. We felt abused. We felt like second-class citizens. We didn't like that. So we don't want to do that to anyone else. And so they said, why don't we, and this is really part of the genius of what started America, and that was they said, how about any area over here? If they want to become a state, they have to have four things. First thing, they have to have a reasonable territory. So they can't just say, well, we want all of it that's not part of the state, and that'll be our state. No, they had to have a reasonable geographic boundary, reasonable territory, reasonable size. Then they had to have a reasonable population. Sawyer could not run out in the woods and say, I'm a state! I'm the state of Sawyer! No, that wouldn't be good either. They had to have a reasonable number of people. Third thing is they had to have a Republican form of government. Tansy could not come up here and say, I'm queen! No, it had to be a Republican form of government where people elected others to speak on their behalf. And the final thing is they had to ask. The government would not just say, well, you have to be Michigan. No, they said, when people think they have a reasonable territory, they have a reasonable population, they established a Republican form of government, and they ask, then we will admit them as a state. That's what? They would ask to become a state. Okay, nobody would force them. Go away. Change the map. It's really awful. Yeah, you all the smart kids? Okay. Don't you hate glasses with these masks? Yeah. We really can't right now because I can't drag the smart board outside. All right, here we go. Oh, now I'm going to go too far. That'll scare you right there. Picture Mr. Guy. Okay. The people of the United States decided, hey, you know what? The Articles of Confederation aren't a good form of government. We need to change them. So the states decided that they would have a convention in the city of Philadelphia. Convention again means coming together. So they sent representatives from each of the states to Philadelphia. They said, let's rewrite the Articles of Confederation. Let's just goose them a little bit so that they work a little bit better. But this little tiny guy, and he really was a tiny guy, he was like 5'2", James Madison, guy who's, yeah, stand up. Yeah, okay. Yeah, you're taller than he was. Okay.
I'm 5'5".
You're way taller than him. You're what? 4'11". Okay, he would look down on you and he would be so happy. Okay. Anyway, so James Madison, for whom our state capital is named, James Madison rushed to Philadelphia. He wanted to be one of the very first to arrive, and he was. James Madison is called the father of the Constitution because he looked at the Articles of Confederation and said, boy, you know what? This just isn't workable. This is just too badly flawed. This is a horrible document. We need to dump the Articles of Confederation and come up with something new and completely different. And James Madison had the plan for what to do. Every time representatives from another colony came, James Madison quickly went to greet them, spent a little time with them, explained his idea. Now, they got together, and one of the first things they decided to do would be to make their discussions in secret. Whoa. Wow. To have secret discussions. Now, why would they do that? Why would they say we should just not tell anybody out in the public what the government's doing? Maybe. Anybody else have an idea? Honey?
Not to worry people. Not to, kind of like what Owen said, just not to worry them.
Not to panic them, not to worry them. Okay? There was something else. Yes, honey?
They didn't want them to think that they were gonna
Okay. Didn't want people to think they were going to change it without talking to them. Possibility. Cha-cha? Talk about something in the public way. Maybe they talked about something they didn't want the public to know. That's really, really close. Okay. These people are politicians. Many of them. Okay, they're going to be governors, they're going to be senators, they're going to be congressmen and president in the future. Let me ask you this. If I said to, I said to Claire Bear, I said, Claire, what do you really think of Mr. Goddard? Now, Claire is a 7th grader. It doesn't have a whole lot to do with Mr. Goddard this year. But she's thinking ahead and she said, he'll be my history teacher next year. Maybe he'll be my homeroom teacher next year. He could make my life kind of wonderful. He could make my life kind of awful. So I better watch out for what I say. So what Claire is really thinking is, oh, that man is disturbed. He scares me. Every time I see him, I want to run and hide because I just get creepy. And what in fact she actually says out loud is, that man is like a father to me. I love that man. Whatever comes out of his mouth is wonderful because she's thinking ahead and trying to cover her tracks for next year. So we wouldn't get the true story. We wouldn't get an honest answer necessarily. That's what they were doing with the Constitution. With the Constitution, they were saying, we're going to create a government which we hope will last for centuries. We have a lot of brilliant people in this room that are going to help write it. And we need them to use their brilliance and say what they honestly think. What if someone today in the Senate made a speech off in Washington, D.C., and it was, we'll pick Ron Johnson from Wisconsin. If Senator Ron Johnson, the senator from Wisconsin, who's up for election in 2 years, if somebody asked him, well, what should we do about a certain program? And he knows deep down in his heart that this program is horrible for the United States. It's just awful. It is bad from start to finish. But it seems to work out really well for Wisconsin dairy farmers. He'd probably say, oh, this is a good program. We need to keep this. Let's refund this. Let's make sure this goes. Because he's thinking about maybe another election. That's nothing against him personally. I'm just using him as an example. Pull the name out of my head. But he's saying, okay, I have to come up for election, and the people of Wisconsin, at least the dairy industry, really seems to like this. So I've got to think ahead about that. So maybe he would think it was awful on a large scale, but now he's saying, well, maybe it's a pretty good thing for Wisconsin. These guys are creating a government at the Philadelphia Convention, which is going to last for centuries. They need these people to speak honestly. That is a horrible idea. That's a really good idea. That would be bad for my state, but I think it's the thing we should do. So that's why they did it in secret. Woo! Patrick Henry, great speaker, large nose. He said, I smell a rat. He thought, oh, these people at the Philadelphia Convention, I can't believe they are doing this in secret. This is scary. This could be government getting out of control. Thomas Jefferson, who was in France, he was being our minister in France, he was just shocked at the secrecy. I can't believe that our government would do this. This is so scary. But yes. What are we doing here? Okay. Well, yeah, it's up there. I have no idea if this is the right. Yeah, there we go. I don't know why we skipped one last time. Okay, got this?
No.
Wait a minute, I'm not through drawing the pictures. Man, I just got to get that curl over there on Patrick Henry. Why what? Because they were afraid that the government, like the British had done, were going to grab some power and take some people's rights away. Okay. Like, you have to just go one slide. Here it comes. George Washington had been elected the president of the Constitutional Convention, not the president of the United States. There wasn't one yet. This is where they're just writing the Constitution and creating the idea of having a president. He'd been elected to be in charge of the convention. His character went a long way in having Americans think, okay, this must be a good thing because George Washington is leading it. George Washington puts his name on it. Let me explain to you the character of George Washington. At the end of the American Revolution, the French army had gone back to France. The British army had moved up to Canada or back over to Britain. The only army in the United States was the American army. And they were kind of fed up with Congress, who maybe hadn't paid all their bills or paid all their soldiers. And they were thinking, okay, this is a mess. We should make George Washington king. And the army offered to support him and make him king. He could have been King George I of the United States. And Washington said, I did not overthrow a dictator in order to become one. He turned down the crown. He turned down being king because he said, that would be great for me. I could go build myself a palace, wear some cool robes, get a nice hat. But he said that would be terrible for the United States. This is called, ready, here it comes, huge word, big word, well, term actually, 2 words, civic virtue. Civic virtue, C-I-V-I-C, C-I-V-I-C, virtue, V-I-R-T-U-E, V-I-R-T-U-E, civic, C-I-V-I-C, space, virtue, V-I-R-T-U-E, civic virtue. Virtue is doing what's right. Civic virtue means for the country. So here it is, George Washington. He's got the only army. He could be king. All he has to do is say yes, and instead he says no. That's not why we had this war. That's not what needs to happen for this country to be going in the direction it needs to be. So George Washington had turned this down. Now, when Patrick Henry, Thomas Jefferson, people like that who were very respected because of the role they played in the revolution. Now, when they say, oh my gosh, no, 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 this is terrible, they're meeting in secret, people say, yeah, but George Washington is there, and George Washington's in charge, and George Washington already proved that he has the best interest of the people in mind, not the best interest of himself, so we can trust him to make sure this happens well. Okay. Don't you wish we still dressed like that, guys? New pair of pantaloons. Okay. What did they come up with? The 3 branches of government. Like a tree, it has one base, one foundation, one government, then it branches off in 3 different areas. Again, just thinking about the election that we've just gone through, this is so important to understand. The executive branch. Well, think. Yes. The executive branch is there to enforce the laws. That's all of the presidents. And of course, they have lots of people who help them. The executive branch isn't just the president. There's also the vice president. There's also all kinds of things to enforce the law. I don't know. Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, federal marshals, the CIA, the FBI, all kinds, Homeland Security, all of the departments of government, Health and Human Services, Energy, Homeland Security, like I just, boom, all the different Department of Defense, all that. That's all there to help the president enforce the law, to make sure that the will of the people is carried out. The judicial, those are the courts. And they said, okay, our federal government is going to make one Supreme Court. And supreme means just that. There is nothing higher. When the Supreme Court makes a decision, that's it. That's the decision. There's no place to carry it. Okay. But they just can't have those 9 justices listening to all the federal court cases that happen. So there are some cases, like we talked about an argument between states, they go right to the Supreme Court. But these other things, you know, if there's somebody's rights have been stepped on, it would start in a lower federal court. There are district courts, 94 districts, got to break it up, get a lot of different courts so people can get access to a trial. Then they go up to an appeals court if they figure there's something wrong with the decision of the lower court. And then if they still think there's something wrong, it could possibly go up to the Supreme Court. Then there's the legislative branch, the second branch. These are the guys that make the laws. And when I say guys, I obviously mean gals too. This is the people. These are the people that make the laws. I don't want to step on anybody's toes because there are plenty of wonderful women legislators. Yes?
If somebody were to murder somebody, like a very 60 murder, like, where would he go?
No, actually, Omar asked if somebody murdered somebody, which court would they go to? And the answer is murder is a state crime. They'd go to a state court. They wouldn't go to a federal court at all. There are different crimes that are against the law in different areas. If you murder someone, that's a state crime. You go to a state court, you go to a state prison. But they've made other things like bank robbery and kidnapping into federal crimes. So you go into a federal court, then you start at the bottom. Yes, ma'am.
So if you were to murder someone very important, like someone in the government, let's say you murdered the vice president.
Yes, that would be a federal crime. Okay, yeah. You guys worry me. So, if I were to murder somebody close to me, somebody really close to me. Yes, sir. What? What would you have to do to go there? To go there as in to be elected into the House of Representatives, or to go there as in to visit? What kind of crime to go there? That's Congress. Hopefully none. I'm not sure I understand your question, buddy, because this is legislative, the lawmakers. Okay. Yes, there are only 100 senators, so you can tell that's more than that. There are 435 congressmen representatives, so that's the House. Okay. I don't know, in Congress, or excuse me, in the Capitol building, the big building with the dome in Washington D.C. There are two big areas, two big rooms like this on either end. One of them is the House, one of them is the Senate. So they're in the same building, they're doing similar work, and sometimes they have to get together and meet because both houses have to pass exactly the same law. Yes?
Do they ever meet in the dome? What is the dome?
They do, no, not in the dome. The dome's just a big open area, great photo op place. Stick dead people in there so we can all walk by and look sad.
Well, why do they stick dead people in the dome?
Well, they don't stick random dead people like if a president, Abraham Lincoln's assassinated, they put him in the Capitol.
Why do they put it in the dome? It's so high up.
Why do you ask me this when I'm being recorded? Otherwise, I'd say Halloween decorations. No, okay, it wasn't really that. I'm dead president. Okay, that's cool. Sorry, everybody listening at home. Okay, so the legislative, they make the laws. That's their job. They don't enforce them. They make the laws. It's the president's, the executive's job to enforce them. Okay. How are we going to get this? Who's going to decide on these laws? Virginia, which had a lot of people, they said, well, clearly, it should be more votes to the states that have more people. So that's the way it should be. I mean, come on, we have more people. We should have a lot more votes. We have like 6 times as many people as Rhode Island, so we should have 6 times as many votes. And Rhode Island said, whoa, hey, hold it. We're a state too. States are equal. So little places like New Jersey said, no, every state should have the same representation. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, don't care, but they should all have the same number of votes. What they decided on was a combination. We have what is called a bicameral legislature, or a 2-house legislature. We have the Senate, which is an equal number per state. There are 2 senators per state. We have 50 states, so there are 100 senators. The House of Representatives, though, that's done by population. And when we looked at the map of electoral votes, remember, there were 53 representatives over in California and 8 in Wisconsin and 1 in Montana because there's so few people there. So the more people, the more representatives a state would have. But every state has to have at least 1. What, bud? Okay. One of the big fights, which will be happening now, and it's come up several times in the past, but I think they'll move on it again. Again, I don't want to get into big political things. If Joe Biden is elected, they decide he's the winner, then I'm guessing the Democratic people would probably try to have Washington, D.C. made into a state because that would give, it's very Democratic area, they give 2 more Democrat senators. If Donald Trump were to be reelected, they wouldn't do that because there's no way he'd sign it. So it's a little game they play to see who can kind of finagle for future power. Same thing with Puerto Rico. They push Puerto Rico being a state sometime. I don't know what happened with their vote. I know they were voting again on whether to become a state. Anybody know? Do you know, or are you going to say I have a different question? With what? What's the 51? And DC? Okay, all right. So they, well, never can tell.
But the 50 state song would be the 52 state song.
It happens. It happens. You got to rewrite the music once in a while. Yeah, oh, that's happened a lot. Okay. Here we go. Here we go. You got it?
Where would the 2 stars go?
I don't know. I don't know. They find some kind of a cool geometric pattern. I mean, every time they've added a state, they've changed the stars because it's always whatever number it is. You know.
But I like the stars.
They're very nice. All right, wait. Shh. Yes.
For like the ancient times, like they had like the old flag had 13,000.
Wait, so
Yes.
what?
Weren't they superstitious about 13? Why would they go to bed and listen to 13?
No, there were 13 colonies or 13 original states, so there's nothing much you can do about that. It means all of the federal buildings, all the state buildings, city buildings, all the embassies, yeah, they'd all buy new flags, which is really good for the flag business. So there you go. If you guys are, if you're ready to invest, and it may be worth investing in flag company there. Yes. Okay. I will. All right. Hang on. No, I'm not going to open that can of worms today. We will get to it when we have a decision, so we can intelligently talk about both sides of what the argument was. But right now, all I can tell you is accusations made, and I don't know. I need some more court decision or whatever, so I have some idea what really went on. I do. That is debatable right now. Okay. Yes.
They're revoting.
Wait. What? Can I go back a slide? Why? What are we doing? Did you write it all down? Hurry up, you can have like 7 seconds. Okay. All right, you gotta get it from no time because I see. We're almost out of time and I want to see what else they did here. Oh, that's where we were going, but done. We haven't got any time. It's 9 o'clock.
Yay!
Okay, you can cut it off. Thank you, sweetheart.